And now, Tony, the floor is yours.
All right. Hey, thank you. Good afternoon to all of you in Poland. And if any of you are calling in from the West, the US, good morning to you. And good evening if you're calling in from Asia. Hey, I wanted to take the opportunity to let you know that much as I'd like you to see my handsome face, we've had some technical challenges with bandwidth quality from the US. And so I apologize, but you're going to see a picture of me. But on the other hand, I am absolutely delighted that you can not just see live via video the rest of my panel, but you're going to get some incredible insights from them. I'd like to go ahead and name my panel. So first off, Anna Bartoszewicz-Wnuk, who's the head of workplace advisory at Jones Lang LaSalle. Katarzyna Józefowicz, managing director, head of the Wrocław office, Credit Suisse. Peter Mitchell, head of global business services, Krakow, ABB. And Remigiusz Wojciechowski, head of the shared service center in Gdansk for Bayer. Again, good afternoon and welcome to my panel. You've heard a lot about how this is an unusual situation. But as always, I think every issue is an opportunity. When the pandemic first hit us, you heard a lot of people say, well, this is going to slow down digital transformation. And then you heard them say, well, this is going to adversely impact shared services centers because people are going to try and move the services back, to their headquarters, right? Clearly, 3 months into the pandemic, none of this has turned out to be true. In fact, if anything, it has enforced the acceleration of digital transformation, and it has actually strengthened the role of the shared services centers. And with that in mind, I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves and provide you some insights. So if you wouldn't mind, let me start with Anna. Anna, please give us a little bit of your background and your role.
Now, we will try to develop what's going on, but maybe Tony, sorry for that change, if you could move on to the next question and the next person.
Sure, not a problem. Should I start with Katarzyna?
Sure, thank you very much, Tony. I hope you all can hear me well.
Yeah.
Well, it's been now for me almost 5 years with Credit Suisse, and introducing myself, I'm a site head for Wrocław, and also I'm a head of operations for Credit Suisse locally. Of course, the whole situation with COVID-19 is pretty fascinating. I'm quite sure that there will be plenty of books about it and quite a lot of articles and developments. And we, as an organization, we're extremely proud how fast and how quick we were able to adapt to the new environment, and how quickly we were able to test our technology on this absolutely enormous scale, and how positive the outcome of this test was.
Thank you. That's awesome. Let's move on. Peter, would you mind introducing yourself and your background? Peter?
No, we cannot hear you, Peter.
Hello, Peter?
Maybe try muting or unmuting.
Mm-hmm. No, still.
Not now.
Yep.
Let us let us work on that maybe, and if we can move to Remigiusz, and we'll work on Anna and Peter.
Sure, no problem. Remig, please go ahead. Yes, hi, we can hear you.
Okay, so hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Remy, please go ahead.
Okay, cool. So hello everyone. Thank you for having me in the panel. I decided to do this in the standing mode, and I hope I'm not fidgeting too much and not cause any headaches for people watching. By education, I hold a master's degree in international business administration. By passion, my passion has always been with IT, and that's how I started my career with Bayer on the crossing between finance and IT. And it's been 18 years now. And I've had different roles, but in 2012, I got a chance of a lifetime and was tasked with building a new service center for Bayer in Gdansk. The organization is part of a global network of shared services, which employs in total some 4,000 employees, and 800 of that is in Gdansk. And an interesting fact is that we have hired 160 new employees this year, and the major part of that was happening during the pandemic lockdown.
That is an amazing story, and I'm looking forward to hearing much more from Remig on this. Let's go back and see if we can get Anna.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Anna Bartoszewicz-Wnuk. I'm heading Workplace Strategy and Change Management at JLL in Poland. And I'm also the member of the management board at JLL here. I'm with the company for the last 20 years, I must say, proudly, 10 of which I headed the research and consultancy department comprised of business analysts and consultants. And since mid-2016, I'm heading a newly set up division of workplace strategy and change management, working closely with occupiers, with tenants, with companies like yourselves, helping shaping real estate strategies, translating global into local, and helping people go with the change at workplace. JLL is the real estate strategic partner to ABSL since the beginning, since the foundation of ABSL in Poland, helping with expertise, data, and that sort of stuff. And JLL in Poland has 1,500 people, mainly in the Warsaw headquarters. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, delighted to have you on board, Anna. All right, let's try Peter again. Peter?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you. Good. Brilliant. Thank you.
Fantastic. I just, messed around with the audio so I can go last here. So Peter Mitchell from ABB. I've been 15 years with the company, 23 years in the shared service industry. My background is predominantly finance. I was given the opportunity to run the Global Business Services hub in Krakow for ABB 18 months ago. Best job I've ever had, and definitely the most challenging the last few months. We've maintained, let's say, our services above and beyond expectations, and definitely have managed to keep hiring people and keep the building also open, even through the difficult times. When Kasia said there will be lots of books written about this situation, I can tell you we probably could put our heads together and write that book, but we're not there yet. So yeah, very happy to be speaking here amongst the colleagues in the industry.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to start with Kasia. Could you describe for us right now, how COVID-19 has impacted your office at Credit Suisse?
Well, to the certain extent, it impacted massively. And if you look at the outcome of our work, actually, it didn't change that much. And of course, the biggest change, and this is typical for our industry, is current percentage of people working from home, which in case of Credit Suisse, which is 5,700 people organization in Poland, is around 99%. Pretty much everybody who wants to work from home can do this. What was a real challenge for us was that we never tested this on such a large scale. So of course our employees had this opportunity to work from home, and of course we try to be as flexible as possible, and we allowed this to happen with maybe 15-20% of the population at any point in time, but we never really tested that 100% of the population would be working from home. And then we had to move to this mode very, very quickly. And how this happened was that if you remember these days in Poland, not sure about other countries, but in Poland, there was a little panic at the beginning, and people treated the virus very seriously, which I think was altogether good. Our society was very disciplined. But even when we scheduled transfer to full work from home for 1 week, it was almost difficult for us to keep it this way. So practically it happened within 2-3 days. Everything worked well. All the connections, all the capacity that we have, all the IT infrastructure. And it turned out that suddenly the whole organization can really very well and efficiently work from home, which is, of course, really very exceptional for our whole industry. And one point that I wanted to make about this is that before, I think working from home was somehow, sometimes for some managers, not the optimal way of working. And there was a social stigma, like maybe you work from home too often or every Friday and so on. I think the biggest change that we can observe is this change of mentality of the managers. And I think now there is no more stigma. Everybody's reconciled with this, and everybody understands that working from home actually doesn't mean working lighter. It's actually very often better and more effective.
Awesome, thank you. Kasia, one of the things that I really enjoyed hearing from you is this whole mindset item. And I will get back to you to talk a little more about mindset. But I'd like to ask the same question of Remig, because Remig, Bayer has in some ways been a little better prepared than most companies with moving to the cloud and other things. So how was the situation at Bayer when the pandemic struck?
Okay. I would say to a large extent, very similar. We have, one specific thing about our organization, as I mentioned, we're part of a global network, and one of the locations in that network is in China, in Dalian. So we had a little bit of a benefit of an organization experiencing the lockdown and the consequences of the pandemic earlier on. And when the time came, like when the virus arrived in Europe and all the countries started their different lockdown approaches, we basically moved the whole organization to home within 2 days. We were able to maintain operations. There was one day in the first week when the VPN connection started hitting its limits, but IT were able to extend the throughput, and it was only one day when we were, having some trouble. As I mentioned already, we continued not only hiring but also transferring activities from different locations to Gdansk. And in the meantime, we have reopened the office. However, I think this is also, from what I hear from my colleagues, from my peers, not a surprise and not very specific to our location. The office usage is very, very low at the moment. And to come to your to the point you're making, like what helped us, I think it was a range of things. Definitely the fact that we have taken business continuity planning very, very seriously, and it was thoroughly tested every year. There was even a stage in the development of our BCP when we received an ISO certification. So all the communication channels and certain automatisms were there, but at the same time, we were also not used to having the whole organization relocated. The fact that our employees were equipped with laptops from the outset helped a lot. The fact that our processes are predominantly paperless, the switch to cloud-based computing, this is not finalized yet, but at least in the Microsoft world, we have moved all the applications to the cloud, which helped us big time, especially in terms of not overburdening the VPN connection. And last but not least, it's a difficult situation for everyone, and it's a mixture of concerns related to the business, but most importantly, also concerns that people have on personal level. And what helped us a lot was a very strong and highly motivated leadership team.
Awesome. Yes, and clearly it was inspirational to hear, how you guys kind of smoothly moved into this from a global operations standpoint. I want to give a slightly different perspective now from a real estate standpoint. And Anna, obviously, you work with clients and you're seeing how some of this has impacted the real estate industry. So could you talk a little more about what you saw when the pandemic struck from a real estate facilities, lease and tenant standpoint?
Sure. It's been a journey indeed as we navigate through COVID-19. And 3 months back, actually, hardly anybody could predict how long the work from home will continue. At JLL, initially we were busy, and we are busy up until now, actually, surveying people at client side, comparing the sentiment connected with work from home with the sentiment connected with the work from the office. So we have carried out a number of different surveys, and the conclusion are, there are 3 conclusions I can summarize. First of all, the conclusion is that many companies realize they can work from home and it really works. And particularly this industry, the business services industry, is actually, the test is really working for you, I must say, because we compare the results of the headquarters staff with the shared service industry staff, and especially in terms of the job effectiveness and in terms of the cooperation with clients. The office compares really well to the home office environment in your industry. So that was the first finding. The second finding is that the location of the worker is less and less important. This is, again, very good for you, a good message for this industry. And the third learning is that the office is the place where you come to collaborate, innovate, socialize, and learn, as opposed to more individual type of work done at home. So after that, after this initial period of surveying sentiment, we were looking at re-entry preparation. So many companies approached us with the request to prepare the workplace for re-entry. And we were helping with actually visualizing social distancing on space plans, helping developing the etiquette of behaviors, new behaviors at work. So we were busy with that. And I must say, typically the return to the office is a phased process. Around 20-30% of staff at the companies who returned are operating from the offices, although many postponed the return to the office decision up until later in the year, September, or even next year. And actually, I can refer to some very interesting quotes and stats from the fresh survey of CEOs from the Fortune 500 list, which came out fresh yesterday, to the question, when will at least 90% of your workforce have returned to their usual workplace, 26% replied never. Further, 38% said between January and June next year. So this is important, and it's really important to realize this when shaping the next normal. So this is the road, the journey up until now. Now we are more focused on the reimagination of what can happen when the pandemic is over.
Awesome. It's actually very interesting for me to see, and I had the opportunity to also read the Fortune CEO survey. They're absolutely right. We are never going back. This is always going to be moving forward, and that's also, one of the things that I enjoyed talking to Peter Mitchell about. Peter, you've been in the office every day since COVID-19. Your office has actually stayed open, and in the work that you do, actually driving the industry call with 40 companies in the past 9 weeks, you've heard a lot of how transformation actually continues. So what do you expect in the next 3 to 6 months? Accelerate change, a new normal? Could you share your perspectives with us?
Absolutely, Tony. It's been an incredible last couple of months, almost like a roller coaster, and sharing ideas and listening into many of the other peers within the industry, particularly in Krakow. This sharing experience has helped us a lot navigate our ways through and weather the storm, as I would refer to it as. We are a 2,000 plus organization for shared services in Krakow. We have close to 7,000 people in Poland. Also, if I take into consideration the operations, so learning from our factory workers and the heads of the businesses and looking at the different kind of aspects we have, we're kind of hit on all different parts of the industry as well. We've kept it open, and by the very beginning, from the word go, we introduced the thermal screening quite quickly. One of 4 companies at the very start of this pandemic, and we were quite quick with our business continuity, similar to what one of the other colleagues was mentioning as well. But we had it twice daily, 5 days a week, including actually on a Sundays. At the very beginning, we had the management team come together to understand what is happening on a daily basis, almost on a every 6 or 7 hour basis. That's now kind of relaxed a bit over the last few weeks. We're now down to maybe 2 or 3 times a week. The call is taking maybe a few minutes. So we're after moving into this kind of new normal, and it's challenged a lot of our processes from the day one. For example, just before it hit, we were just about to start our mid-month onboarding. Now, when people run out of the building, 100% overnight, and the schools are closed, then you're trying to figure out who's going to be around to actually do the onboarding, and is it safe to do the onboarding? So you might have the safety precautions in place, and looking closely at what other companies have been doing, what the government are enforcing. But one thing we learned very quickly is that through the disruption, the processes that we've had over the years were quite quickly to be challenged and also to be improved. In fact, we put our onboarding process on the table. Just in a few hours, we managed to almost digitalize half of it. The rest of it was taken out or put into different kind of, let's say, breaking it down into blocks. And we actually had, a room which was filled like a classroom, and managed to onboard over the last couple of months close to 250 people without any incidences. So that's something that I take as a learning out of this. This disruption has led to a more digitalized mindset, and the art of impossible has now become the art of possible. I think as we go a little bit further down the road now, we're going to have to, of course, take this careful, and the staged approach is something we are not just looking at, but we've already implemented this. The mindset change is quite powerful here, and also the change management. So we've been communicating quite strongly to all employees on an ongoing basis. Every little detail helps, and every little detail matters. People really want to understand what's happening, even if it's about the desk that they used to sit at. And now, you know, from one day to the next, overnight, we go to 100% hot seats. You know, losing that personal touch in the office with the plant on the table and the extra pair of shoes underneath the desk, it's gone, you know, and you have to be able to communicate this effectively. You need to have your management and your leadership behind you and make sure that we cascade, but also communicate the strong message and the need for change together collectively. I agree with what some of the colleagues were mentioning about the workplace becoming more of a place for collaboration and working closer together and kind of bringing that social element to the table. But we're having trouble getting people back. And I'd like to highlight that as well on the call today is, you know, it's one thing to get the place ready for reintegrating or reintroducing people to the workforce, but it's very difficult to get people back after 3 months. It's become a habit. You know, we are creatures of habit, and it's going to be hard to break that habit. And regardless of the fact that the world is somehow moving on, I think it's the next challenge to get that kind of strength and workforce coming back in and looking for different ways to manage that. You have, of course, your business critical teams that are here on an ongoing basis for payroll activities, for closing the books, and maybe for some, you know, confidentiality projects that are happening. But regardless of this, we have to also, you know, look into our industry with over 300,000 people here in Poland. And there's a large proportion of the people that are at a very young age that need still some guidance. I will probably not say, you know, the hand-holding, but definitely they need that leadership and bringing people together, particularly in a kind of a transactional process. It probably would make more sense to have them closer to the operations and within the system here. So it's a struggle, I would say. We're working on that. We did a survey recently where around 68% of our employees out of 2,000, let's say, are happy to basically stay at the home office environment, whereas the rest are willing to come back, already have returned, are struggling to come back because they have some obligations with looking after family and kids. So still quite a high percentage of willingness to return, but I would like to see this increase a little bit more going forward.
That's awesome, Peter. One of the things that I really admired when we spoke earlier was the role model of leadership, and you know how you and your team have been a calming force, as always in the case of Peter, with a touch of humor added to it. So I'm sure people always appreciate that. Which takes me to this point that, you know, both you and Kasia had mentioned, which is mindset. Kasia, when we had spoken earlier, you talked about how preparation and mindset, open mindset, and listening to employees is so important. You talked about how in one of your previous jobs at another really, really big bank, you know, disaster recovery used to be all about having empty rooms with computers, with disaster recovery sites all over the place. Today, that looks different. And all of this is mindset and working with employees. So could you talk a little bit about the importance of, you know, leadership mindset and listening to employees and preparedness in this context?
Yes, absolutely. So these rooms with computers waiting for a potential disaster to happen, I must add that it was 25 years ago, and plenty of things change. And even with my previous employer, obviously nobody does it anymore. It's a way too expensive solution nowadays, and the technology allows us to organize this kind of disaster support in a form of, for example, working from home. But obviously, the mindset has changed. I mentioned this one aspect about getting out of the social stigma. I think another one or two are that there were managers, because in Credit Suisse, we already work in a smart working system, which of course employees don't like that much. It's nicer to have your own desk. It's nicer to have your own space, which you don't have to clean every day. So that is quite understandable. But, and as a person who's responsible for organizing space in the office, I have received plenty of requests and questions with explanations why this area cannot do this smart working, why this area cannot work from home, and so on. And beautifully, during this COVID-19 crisis, suddenly it turned out that everybody can work from home, and suddenly all the managers agreed to this. So that's a huge change from my point of view. Another interesting fact is that, of course, we try to be flexible with employees, but I think we were never as flexible as we are currently, and I definitely hope that this is going to stay with us. For example, I know now about employees who start very early, like 5 in the morning, then they do breaks during the day for a few times, then come back in the evening and so on. There are jobs which have to be done in the specific time, but there are jobs where you have this flexibility. And it was more difficult to offer this to employees when they were working from the office, because office also has certain opening hours, for example, reception and facilities and support and so on. There are certain hours how it works. And again, this happened mainly because we really had no other choice. If you remember what happened in March, almost overnight, the schools in Poland were closed. The same about kindergartens and nurseries. And the employees get the option to get this additional childcare leave. And I remember our initial reaction as management. We were really scared of this because we felt, okay, we have young population, plenty of people who have children from our employees, and obviously they may like to go for this kind of leave. And it turned out that together, working with managers and with employees, it was really quite a limited number of people who decided to take this childcare leave. And that was mainly because we also offer flexibility. We say, we understand, your spouse is working, you have to share, you can do this at this time, somebody else can do this at another time, and so on. So I don't remember us to be as flexible as we are currently, and that's definitely something that's going to stay with us. But I wanted to add to what my colleagues also say, that we really don't know the long-term impact of working from home. We are currently super enthusiastic because we know that we can, and we know that it's working, and we are servicing clients and things are good, and generally Poland turned out to be an excellent place, very well equipped in terms of infrastructure, talent, everything. But if you think about long-term, like 6 months, 12 months, and so on, I think there are other things that we have to take into consideration. And it was mentioned already before, question of people who join the organization. While I do believe that it's fine for people who work together for plenty of years and they know each other pretty well, and it's for them okay to contact just remotely. But if we think about people who are joining organization, especially young people who are straight from university, personally, I think that building of this relationship that with other people is more difficult when you work from home. Not impossible, but definitely more difficult. And while we do all these things like remote onboarding, we can do remotely literally everything. I think we need very balanced approach going forward, and we need to find the right mix between working from home and working from the office. And I think office will be still required and will be still needed by us.
Oh, that's absolutely fascinating, and yes, trying to figure out what that new workplace of the future looks like, with the multifaceted ecosystem, is certainly going to be an adventure. But I want to go back to one of the things I talked about at the outset during the introduction, where when the pandemic struck, there was a lot of concern about slowing down of digital transformation and even moving work from headquarter locations to shared services centers. Remik, when you and I talked earlier, you talked about how in some cases work processes like payroll that people thought would never move out of certain locations in the West certainly had to, because everybody had to do things paperless. So could you share a little more about that transformation and how this is driving the realization in all parts of the world that shared services can play an important role on paperless and going digital? Could you share your perspectives?
Yeah, happy to do that. I mean, before I do that, just a quick comment. It's very interesting to hear how in totally different locations, totally different organizations, we're experiencing the same things and also come to very similar conclusions. I fully subscribe to what was said before. Now, looking at the impact of the couple of months that we were in the lockdown in the pandemic, I mean, there's a number of taboos that were broken, and it not only applies to the organization as such, but also to us, the leadership team personally. I remember we were actually, we still have a very classical conservative office model before the pandemic started, with having a one-to-one allocation to the offices. And our guys from headquarters were actually telling us, well, you should be more flexible and so on. And I always told them, I like the idea, but I have so many projects, transformation and transition projects that I need to deliver within the next 2 years. I don't need another battlefield. And just like Kasia said, the reality has shown that the battlefield has appeared out of nowhere, and there was no other option than to work remotely from home. And now we are, as probably everyone else, looking into a new office model. Now coming more to your point, we're in the middle of many transition projects, and one of them is the HR services for Germany. And before the pandemic started, we had a heated debate because a number of those processes in Germany still required sending out of paper letters to students or to people who have retired already. They're basically a pretty large customer base for the HR function. And there were so many arguments saying, well, they're not used to digital and so on and so on. And this was kind of clashing with our approach of having a paperless office. Now, within the 3 to 4 months, the situation has, I mean, there was no other option again to do it differently than in electronic form. And then suddenly things that seemed impossible before are now working in an electronic way. There are still some elements also pertaining to our own organization. We still sign labor contracts physically, and it's clear that it's possible to do it with a digital signature. We still do it physically. And on a personal note, I always enjoyed a good reason to come to the office and actually put the signature on the many contracts that we were signing. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's it's a very good story on how, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention, or in this case, digital reinvention. So thank you for sharing that, which takes me to a more industry question, Anna, and specifically the JLL's 3 strategies based on the shape of recovery. Now, of course, this is on everybody's mind, which is what's going to happen to real estate, and that's that's an unknown question because it depends on the shape of the recovery. So could you share a little more about how JLL is thinking of what's going to happen to the real estate industry, regardless of the different scenarios?
Sure. So the fact is that we don't know how the pandemic ends and when it ends. And actually, until the vaccine is available and in place, we can only create scenarios. And hopefully you will be satisfied with this question, with this answer to the question, because we are balancing between three different paradoxes. The first paradox in the perception and in our imagination of a future workplace is that we are balancing between the perception of the workplace, which has loads of social interactions and social contact in it. And on the other side, we are looking at social distancing. So it's either social contact or social distancing at workplace. The second paradox is that we think of a workplace as a safe haven, as we are looking at the office as a place where people come, feel safe, secure, healthy. They can be themselves. They can, there's diversity, inclusion. And on the other side, on the other end of the spectrum, you have surveillance, you have dystopia, you monitor where people go, you track their activity at workplace and back at home. And the third paradox is in the perception of a workplace which should be looked at as a place to form a new fellowship. So you go to the workplace, you go to the office to meet friends, to integrate. So the office should build the ties between people. And on the other hand, the other extreme would be the office, which is isolating people, which is restricting access to the different levels, to different floors. We are closing the boundaries, and we build the environment which is very much isolating people. So based on these three paradoxes, I think we can think of the next normal and based on the curve of the pandemic recovery. So we see three scenarios going forward. One is upon the assumption that the pandemic is all over. So there was a hit and the peak is already behind us. And in that situation, we see the work from home situation regulated formally, and it will be the implicit part of our working culture. So we will be working both from the office and from home. The office will be smaller, and how much smaller, it's then the question to you as an organization. And it depends on the risk profile. So whether you are more like conservative organization, more intermediate or moderate organization, or more progressive in terms of how you approach the change, how much you want to change at workplace. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is when you have the pandemic, situation is like, repeated lockdowns and relaxations, one after another until we have vaccine in place. In that situation, you will continue to work from home. We will continue to work from the office, which is the primarily seen as a place to collaborate, like a symbolic club. But companies will realize that there has to be the third place, and this third place will be located nearby where people live, so that to avoid using the public transportation to centrally located office. So we will have an ecosystem comprised of three elements: work from home, work from even smaller office, and working from the flex space, which has the ergonomics that potentially the work from home conditions lack, and it will be closer to where people live. So that was the second scenario. And the third scenario is, I would say, a pessimistic vision, and we gave it a name, fortress type of office, a bunker-like office. This is when there will be a second wave of COVID-19 pandemic, in which situation we are in uncharted territory. We will revisit the way we design offices. Office blocks will be also designed differently. Most likely, there will not be like high-rise office buildings will not be that popular. More like lower rise buildings with separate vertical communication, so separate staircase up, down, separate entry, exit to avoid the risk of contamination. So, and this is completely uncharted territory. It will actually be reflected in the densification of space, so more square meters per desk at the office. And it will be, again, something we don't know much about, but this is the really unrealistic or unlikely scenario of a second wave or a black scenario.
Right. Absolutely. It's fascinating, but it's also very heartening to see that, you know, the real estate industry is putting, you know, some great creativity into making this a future normal. I'd like to then move on to Peter Mitchell before I hand us back to Paul and Anna for some Q&A from the audience. Firstly, Peter, one of the things that you have talked about is the human element, the importance of physical contact, and you know, as a poet, apparently, among other things, you know, you also talk about you know, how the whole human element is so important. So, in the next few minutes, could you give us your take on what we have learned through this journey about being human?
Absolutely. I mean, just key learning is how fragile we really are, you know, and also how close the world has become, but also how distant that has become. I mean, I don't want to get into any political discussion, but we should really redefine what Europe is all about. Yeah, I mean, the human touch, for me, the way I lead and manage is through the energy I get from people. And, you know, if I'm standing there in front of a camera, as I am today, or you're doing some big session, a town hall in a virtual way, or a virtual leadership meeting, nothing beats the physical interaction amongst people. It triggers and ignites innovation. It triggers and ignites, you know, the way of working in a collaborative way. If you're not happy with each other, you just go to the, you know, the coffee machine, you grab a coffee, you sit down, you figure it out, and you go back to your office or your workplace, and away you go. Your day becomes a little bit, you know, better filled, so to speak, as opposed to being in this maybe home fortress that we've now had to kind of live with the last couple of months. And I do see that it's early days. We really do not know what the next day, the day after the crisis we're in, will look like. I think if the crisis was over a night, we're probably halfway through, and we still have quite some hours to go before the break of dawn. But you know, I really emphasize this power of people being with each other. It's just unbeatable. You know, we get the energy from each other, the emotions that can fill a room, the eye contact and the body language could change an entire meeting on how it goes. And we're exhausted. People are coming to me saying, I'm exhausted. I'm not just about the fact that the kids are interrupting every 5 minutes. It was fun at the beginning to see the kids bouncing around the place in the background, but the novelty wears off, you know, and people are in some shape or form. Most people have ended up in some form of isolation. It's very hard to kind of move away from that. And the line is so blurred between, you know, your private and your professional life that there is a tendency to work even more hours than you would in the office because of this, what we were discussing, the social contact, that, you know, the joke of the day, the song of the day, the event of the week, or the flavor of the month. It's not there, you know, be it virtual coffee breaks and let's have a bit of a virtual book club. Guys, it's not the same, right? that's kind of the strength and also our weakness as humans is we need to have people around people to perform at our highest and excel at what we do and learn from each other. I think often about the change curve when I'm looking at the next steps and how to manage a change. We've gone through probably one of the biggest divestments and we're still, touch wood, on track to close that transaction within 2 weeks from now. Where we've not slowed down because of the situation, but it does take a toll on the organization and the people. We've had the shock of the situation. A lot of people went into denial. It's not really there. Let's just keep going the way we've always gone, and that's come back and bite people as well. Angry about the situation, not being able to control it, and just part of the system and just have to live with it. Depression about not being able to move on and get your life back to normal again. Experimenting different ways of doing things, making certain decisions that you normally would never have to be made in the past before. And then last but not least, in the change curve, acceptance. And all of these, be it what they are all human emotions. And I think some people have gone through that in 5 seconds. Some people it took 5 minutes. And some people are still struggling to get past that curve on this moving on. So let's see what the future entails. But hopefully that this forum is no longer digital next year. No offense, I think it looks really cool. But let's have it physical and let's meet each other.
Positive
Awesome.
statement, Tony.
Thank you, Peter. And this is something that I wanted to kind of end the one-on-one questions on, which is, I know this is of course a big shift to the industry. I know this is a big shift to our individual companies, but at the end of the day, this is all about people as well. It's about each one of you. It's about your health, your family, and more importantly, it's about your people and how you take care of them. So with that, let me turn this over to Paweł and Anna.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, all the panelists and colleagues. It was really moving to hear your stories, very emotional, and we can see you have raised a lot of attention in the eyes of our viewers, and we have come up with a lot of questions which we would like to share with you right now.
Looking at the type of questions, a lot of them circulate around work from home. So maybe we can combine them in just one question. What challenges you foresee if work from home will last longer, and will involve large parts of the employees? And we can also add to this, have you offered any incentives to people for working from home, or aspirations in terms of percentage to work from home in the new normal situation? How do you manage, how do you plan to manage properly working time, registration, overtime, when overtime starts, if people work for the whole day from home or a few breaks in between? So a general approach to what do you think, what challenges and how you manage working from home. And I think that's a general sector question. So maybe we could hear from both Katarzyna, Remigiusz, and ABB, Peter. If you just share your experience in a couple of words.
All right, so perhaps I will start. Yes, well, in terms of support, I know that many organizations and ours also supported employees in terms of equipment. In our case, this was possibility of buying screens, which are particularly important. However, generally, our whole model was that employees could work from home much, much earlier before the whole COVID-19 happened. It was regularly tested, tried, never for such a large scale. So in terms of equipment, the employees already largely had it. The truth is, it's a difference to work from home, when you need 1 day per week, and suddenly to go to the system where you have to do this every day. That's why we felt that the second screen or large screen is required. Going forward, I think that there is definitely possibility that people will work from home more. It's hard to say what percentage would be right. I would guess maybe around even 50%. I already expressed my views that I really think that office is important, and for all the reasons which my colleagues also mentioned. So probably finding the right balance is the answer to the solution. But it's really difficult to say because as it was mentioned, we are in the middle of this crisis. We are absolutely not yet out of the woods, and we don't know how is the long-term impact. And exactly, talking about the impact, because this was also one of your questions, plenty of employees really do not have such ideal conditions to work from home. It is maybe nice if you think about manager who's already financially well established, has separate room, which can be dedicated to this and has enough of space. But our population is quite young, and plenty of our people rent their flats or purchase their initial flats, which are quite small. And it's just difficult, especially when there are small children at home and there is a spouse which is also working. So these conditions are far from ideal, and I know that many people do already long to come back to the office. Definitely, we will have opportunity to activate more of talented people who live in smaller cities. And I think that's something that might be a positive upside of this story. At the moment, plenty of our people actually left Wrocław and they went to their smaller hometowns, and they are there with their family and they are able to work from there. Probably, I think this model will be definitely welcomed by employees going forward.
Thank you very much, Katarzyna. Remigiusz, how it is in case of Bayer?
Yeah, if I may pick up on the last sentence of Kasia, that's exactly, also my personal experience, and also the reason why I like to think about not working in the office as working from anywhere, not only working from home. Addressing the challenges, the aspect of conditions and ergonomics has been mentioned already, and we have tried to address it as much as we could by making monitors and office chairs available to the employees. And we also have added, for the time of the total work from home, a certain allowance so that they can cover, if they need to buy, order a higher throughput of the internet or have any kind of additional expenses, that this is at least covered with the least administrative effort. Another challenge I see, and this has already also been, you could hear that from what the previous speaker said, is the topic of isolation. And this one is definitely something which will continue to be a struggle. We have tried so far to address it, on the one hand, through a very intensive communication, much more intensive than in regular times. I don't think people have ever spoken so much to each other as they are now in the times. Of course, this kind of interaction is somehow limited through the media, but the intensity has never been as high. And additionally, the reason why we're making the office available is not because we want people to return to the office. From the company perspective, as long as they are able to work from home, they should stay at home. But we also wanted to give them the opportunity to, change the environment, to work in a more ergonomic environment. And we did a survey to gauge how many people would be actually interested. And the population of our employees that indicated that they would like to return to the office as soon as possible was at around 15%. Now the reality shows
1.5, just to make sure. 1.5, not
1.5.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But we are now less than 5. Mm-hmm. And what it shows is that people did not want to return to the office as a physical place. They wanted to return to the people. And when they have learned that in the office there will be a very low number of people, because we are pretty conservative in terms of the distance and not causing an environment of cross contamination, they decided not to go to the office because that's not the office they wanted to return to.
Thank you very much. Peter, we wanted to ask you the same question, but we got a very interesting comment. Very genuine insights from Peter. Very true. So maybe we could have a separate question for you touching this. Anya, if you want to read the one because I think it's dedicated to Peter.
Yes, indeed. Peter, you have touched the point of sensitiveness and the state of mind. And what is your personal perception and assessment? What would be the biggest challenge in that respect in the coming year, in the longer term perspective?
In the longer term perspective, the biggest challenge will be to get the band back together again. You know, getting people to work close with each other, getting the team spirit back where it was, getting the integration events slowly but surely coming back to life again, and bringing back that team spirit it's going to be probably one of the biggest challenges we need to overcome as organizations, but also as individuals and members of teams. You know, it's happening slowly but surely, but I had a conversation with someone yesterday who was a very innovative mind, who is leading a lot of innovative people. And, you know, they need to see each other. They need to have that interaction. Otherwise, forget it, you know. I mean, this sense of cultural belonging, this sense of organizational pride and standing behind what your company does and who you are as a company, it's diminishing, it's disappearing, and you may as well work for anybody basically at the end of the day if it continues like this. So to bring that culture and that sense of spirit back to life again is going to be one of our biggest challenges as an industry and as companies within the industry. You know, not everyone is built to work from home. Not everyone should work from home. But yeah, overnight we've done that, and now we're going to have to find a way to bring it back. I do not believe that it will ever be around 50%. It depends on your part of the industry. It depends on your part of which process we're referring to, because some are much more susceptible or, you know, easier to adjust than others. But I would say more 70-30. Policies need to be changed. We need to be careful on how quick we want to adjust. Also on the real estate side, if you lose it, you've lost it for quite some time. It's not easy to get it back. You know, you build up an organization over a period of maybe 130 years. You could spoil it in 130 minutes if we're not careful. So I think we proceed with caution. We need to maintain safety for all employees, for ourselves. We just need to be sensible as well. You know, the fear factor is there. We did a survey, like I was referring to at the beginning. The survey results were, I mean, it was very refreshing. I'll give an example. Within the first 40 minutes, 600 of our employees responded. It was almost like they were sitting there. I'm not saying they were doing nothing, but they were waiting to be asked what's next. And, you know, they were very open about, I think 650 comments came in saying, we want to come back. We want to get back that kind of sense of belonging, but we definitely are afraid of what the behavior will be amongst other people, and even afraid of their own colleagues. It's around discipline. And I think we need to be strong as leaders to make sure we instill this discipline, lead by example. And lead by example means you've got to call it out if someone's misbehaving and doing something dangerous towards others. And that's the only way I think we can get through this, is to put some strict rules in place and follow through, and then slowly but surely start building things back up again.
Thank you, Peter. Very true. And it looks like we need a special treatment for it to make it happen, and which also leads to the question, the last one, I guess we have.
We were looking for the questions to Anna, but most of the questions were concerning the new model of the office. And Anna, previously in your presentation, you have revealed the 3 models. So unfortunately, it will be a challenge to which model is going to work out based on the general situation. But we do want to continue the topic of back to the office today in one of the streams, where we will have the topic of workplace SOS, how to interact. So we will continue it then. And unfortunately, that was the whole time that we had for the panel and the questions. So Tony, thank you very much. Katarzyna, Anna, Remik, and Peter, thank you very much for being so open. I mean, this is what is about ABSL, and you have just proven why it was worth establishing this place. Even in the most difficult situation, with the most personal thoughts and experience, we can share it to make sure that we overcome whatever is ahead of us. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very
Thank you for
much.
having me.
Thank you.
Very much. Bye.